Hello and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to talk about the internal preventive maintenance that you should do with your snowblower. We're going to take a look at the two-stage machines and what needs to be lubricated inside the transmission. We're going to take a look at the single-stage machines and show you what to look at on these. And I'm going to talk about the different brands and how the maintenance is done on them. Part one, we talked about changing the oil and spark plug and stuff like that on the gas engines and some other general maintenance tips. This is mainly talking about stuff where you got to take covers off and take a look. So let's get started.
Down in the dirt. Been real bad.
Let's do a safety thing before we tip the two-stage snowblowers up on their nose. You want to make for sure that you have less than a half a tank of fuel in the machine. Even a quarter tank. Like I talked in the first video, if you have too much gas in it and you want to get it out, use a turkey baster or something like that to suck the fuel out, put it in a container, storage container, until you get done with this maintenance. If you have a machine like a Toro or an Aaron's that has a fuel shutoff, I recommend that you start the machine up, then turn the fuel shutoff off and let it run dry. That way you won't have any fuel in the carburetor. If you have a machine that does not have a fuel shutoff, for example the Stanley Black & Decker ones, there will be some gasoline in the carburetor. Again, make sure you got way less than a half a tank in the fuel, and when you tip it up, you're going to have a little gas run out of the carburetor and run down the engine. It doesn't hurt the machine that you do that. It doesn't hurt the paint or the plastic or anything like that. But just be aware that you're going to have some gas drip out. Be careful if you're doing one of these without the fuel shut off. Be careful. No open lights or sparks or anything like that around it when you're working on it until that evaporates away. If you want to, you can put a piece of cardboard underneath the machine or some oil dry kitty litter to kind of soak that up quick, but there won't be much. There'll be about a quarter cup that'll come out. All right? That's your safety training for today. So first, let's just take a quick look at the different machines, and we'll go from there. There are basically two different types of snowblowers. There is the single stage. It uses an impeller to throw the snow out of the snowblower, and then two-stage machines. Two-stage machines have an impeller and an auger. So the snow comes in with the auger and gets thrown out with the impeller at a higher rate. Transmission-wise, there's a couple different types of transmissions. Actually, there's more than a couple. The one that you're probably most familiar with is the gear style or friction drive. That'll have 4 to 6 speeds forward and 1 or 2 speeds in reverse. You'll have the hydrostatic, which is just a lever without any gears to it. And here's another case of the friction drive here. Or you'll have an automatic like the Toro Snowmaster with the personal pace. And finally, you'll have an auger self-propel. With that, the auger actually pulls you forward on the single stage machines. There is one other type, one that does not have any propulsion at all. That's the Generally, the cheap electric machines, I don't have one here. Toro makes an inexpensive one without power propel, and most of the other brands that have the electric ones, particularly the Chinese ones, they don't have any power propel to them. You just got to push them through the snow. Okay, next. One of my viewers complained I talked too slow, so I'll try talking faster. Anyway, on a two-stage machine, generally, it has a cover that covers the transmission case. It's not sealed. It has vent holes in it, so that if any moisture gets inside, it'll drain out. Snow, anything like that. Typically, they don't get a lot of moisture inside of them. And the parts of the friction drive that may be affected by moisture are all setting vertically, so you usually never have any problems with moisture inside of these. So we're going to take the covers off, and I'm also going to talk about taking the wheels off. Let's do the wheels first. Toro and Aaron's, it's very easy to take the wheels off. On the Toro, all you have to do is pull this pin out and they slide right off of the axle. On the Aaron's, there's a clip. There's a clip that you kind of pick up with a screwdriver, it slides off, and then there is a keyway on the shaft. A keyway has a little piece, a square piece of metal about 3/4 inches long that fits in a key here and fits in the same key on the wheel rim itself. Make sure you catch that if it falls off when you take your wheel off of the Aaron's. Stanley Black & Decker, used to be called MTD, all those models use a bolt and the key is built right into the rim, but there is a keyway on the axle. If you have an older Stanley Black & Decker, more than a couple years old, I don't recommend that you take the wheels off of it unless you really, really want to. Usually those rust on pretty quick and they get pretty hard to take off. If you got a new one or one you haven't used very much, you can try taking them off, and just take some light grease and a rag and wipe these down. Grease them up a little bit. If you want to do it on the inside of the wheel rim, you can, but usually it's just easy enough here. Just put a light coat of grease on it, and then when you put them back on, that way next year when you want to take these off, or if you have a flat tire or something like that, they'll come off easily. There is enough play in these, and they do come pre-lubricated with Aaron's and Toro, so they'll come off even a couple years from now. All right, so now let's take this transmission case off. That's fun. I haven't had that happen before. Don't slap your snowblower. Okay. Anyway, so most of the time, there's one or two covers that cover this transmission up. On the Toros, there's two. On most of the Stanley Black & Decker products, there's just one. It's down here. On the Aaron's, it's one. And on the Aaron's, the bolts are on the side. You can take your wheels off like I just talked about, or you can use a ratcheting wrench to take those bolts off the Aaron's. So I'll take this off. I'll be back in a second. When you take your cover off, see what's laying inside of it. If you find metal chunks or rubber chunks, you want to do a lot more inspection than what I'm probably going to show you today. It'll be dirty. It'll have dirt in it. It may have some oil. The oil comes from just the lubrication that we're going to do and how fast stuff spins in here. You can wipe this down if you want. Hopefully you won't find any extra nuts, bolts, and screws. One of the companies sent me and I won't tell you which one of the companies sent me a new snowblower, and I did this inspection, and before I started using it, and I made a video of it. At the time, I found 3 extra screws and a washer in here that didn't belong at all. It was like somebody was, when they built the machine, they were hiding the parts. But if you have parts that are laying down in here, like nuts, bolts, and screws, go through this very carefully and make sure nothing is missing. Nothing has fallen out. Okay, so just take a look at the inside. Use a flashlight so you got plenty of light. See if there's anything chipped or broken or anything like that. The machine is going to show some rust on these shafts here. Nothing slides on them. And depending on your model, you're going to have more gears than what this one has, or more shafts. But only this piece down here slides. That's the only piece that slides on a shaft. Everything else, it's all fixed. So don't worry about if these have some rust on them. Eventually, as the machine gets older, that rust will turn to a patina and actually protect these parts. So don't worry about it. This is your friction drive here. You have your wheel and your disc, and then this slides back and forth to give you your forward and reverse speeds on a friction drive. Don't use grease, use oil. If you change when you're doing your maintenance and you change your engine oil, use your old engine oil. Put it on a rag and then just reach in and wipe this shaft with the oil. That's all you need to do. Move it over, get this side. There's lots of play in these, so they never rust up, or if you do have one that's stiff, just all you have to do is just oil this up and it'll work fine. I noticed some of the older snowblowers, this piece here that slides back and forth is made of metal, and sometimes that'll get a little corroded, especially if you leave your snowblower sit outside all the time. But all you have to do is just take some oil and take this hex shaft and oil it up, and you should be back to normal. These chains are all self-lubricating chains, so you really don't need to oil them. If you feel you have to put oil on them, make for sure you just put a little bit. Again, use a rag and wipe it around on it. Don't get oil down on this metal plate down here. That's your friction drive. If you get oil on that, you can contaminate your friction wheel, and the thing won't want to go forward and backwards well for you. So be careful with that. These gears over here, and on the trigger steer machines, the gearing that's in them comes self-lubricated with just a little grease. If you want to put some grease on it, just put some grease on 1 or 2 of these smaller gears, and then as the machine runs, it'll work it around. They're actually designed to run without grease. They'll run for years and years without giving you any problems. On the Aaron's and the Toro, the Aaron's Auto Turn and the Toro automatic steering, all of your turning is in this box right here. On your Stanley Black & Decker and other machine and Husqvarnas that have the friction drive and trigger steering, there'll be 2 sets of gears here. One of my other videos way back when shows that on a Troy built, if you want to know more about it. Take and move your levers, and if you notice, if you pull your drive lever, this plate comes up to touch this wheel. That should work nice and freely. The other one controls the V-belt for the auger impeller, and that's up in the front of the engine. And we'll talk about that later on. As you're looking down here, take your flashlight, take a look at your belts, see if your belts are wore. Take a look at the inside of the belt, see if it's cracked. We're going to look at that a little bit more when we go up top and look inside the belt area. Take a look at this friction wheel, and with the machine turned off and where it is right now, this will all move easily for you. So spin that wheel around and look at that wheel and make sure there's no chunks out of it. It'll show some wear, but just mainly you're looking at not having any chunks out of this piece of rubber on this friction wheel. Anything else that you got questions on about the inside of this transmission? It's pretty straightforward, and here you're just looking at to lube that shaft and make for sure there's no pieces falling out of it. Again, you don't have to lubricate the chains. They're self-lubricating. And you don't have to lubricate the gears if you don't want to. If you do, just do a light oiling of the chain and just a real small amount of grease on the gears. Your main thing is you want to try and keep the lubrication down to a minimum in this so it doesn't splash up on that friction drive. Just so you know, when the snowblower is setting the way it should be, this friction drive is setting straight up and down. So any moisture or anything that would get on it automatically gets slung off. Okay? Other transmissions. If you have a hydrostatic transmission in your snowblower, for example, the Aaron's, you don't need to take the covers off the bottom and really take a look at it. The Aaron's has a hydrostatic transmission that sets up here, and then gears that run down to the auto turn. And those gears, they have just enough play in them that you should never really have to think about lubricating them at all. And you'll never have any problems with them. Other snowblowers that have hydrostatic transmissions in them, like the Husqvarna and the Toro, they use a sealed transmission that has all the gearing inside of it and the steering levers, steering triggers, and all that type of stuff. So it's a complete sealed unit. I think, if I remember right, Toro does have a cover underneath the bottom of the transmission. Brands like the Husqvarna, they don't have any covers on them at all. They're just sitting out there in the open. So there's no maintenance that you have to do inside there. There's a Stanley Black & Decker or Troy-Bilt here, sitting here. Cub Cadets, yard machines, all those type of stuff. Most of those use a friction drive, and they're basically like the ones that we just looked at, with a few more gears in them because they're trigger steer. I think Cub Cadet does have some hydrostatics in the Pro versions. Those again use this one-piece system, so there's no gears or anything inside the case that you have to worry about. So let's finish up with the two-stage. Another cover that you should take off is the belt cover. There's a black plastic cover on the front of the engine, and it's usually held in place with 2 bolts. Take those 2 bolts loose. A lot of them are captive, so they don't actually come out of the plastic. So loosen those bolts up, take this off. Sometimes you got to bend and kind of work them to get them off. But under there are your 2 belts that drive your whole machine. The first belt, or the outer belt here, drives the impeller and the auger. That was the big pulley that we looked at inside the transmission. The back belt is for the transmission, the drive. Depending on the machine, For example, Toro and I think Aaron's, this is a constantly under tension. In other words, there's a spring that holds this all nice and tight because the friction plate drives all the time. On some brands like the Husqvarna, when you pull the lever to drive the machine, this comes over. I think you can see it. Comes over, tightens the belt, and that starts up the hydrostatic transmission in theirs. Check, make sure if this one is loose like that, have someone pull the lever and make sure it comes up nice and tight. The same way on your impeller belt, have someone pull the lever and make sure this gets nice and tight. You want about a 3/8 inch flex if you pull on it real hard with your finger. Take a look at the belts, make sure they're not cracked really bad or have chunks taken out of them. If they are, replace the belts now so you don't have to mess with them later on when it's cold out. The pulleys and everything, generally you don't have any problems with them. Toro and Aaron's have really nice pulleys on them. These are stamped, but as long they last a long time. If your machine is really old, sometimes the bearings will wear out on these idler pulleys here, the ones that put the tension on the belts. So wiggle them back and forth, and if there's wiggle in the pulley itself, it'll move back and forth. You may want to replace them so you don't tear your belt up if that pulley fails completely. Okay, any questions on the belts? That's it for two-stage. Now let's take a look at some of the other ones. Okay, let's take a look at the second most popular snowblower. There's still two other types that I'll talk about a little bit later on, a couple oddballs. But single-stage snow throwers, you need a little maintenance to them too. This one happens to be Toro's electric, and no, I haven't cleaned the dust off of it, so it looks a little dirty. Gas-powered ones are basically the same as this electric. You got a motor, gas engine, and then a belt that runs down to the auger impeller in the front. I'm using a different camera today than what I normally use, and tell me how you like it. I think I like my other camera better so far. On a single stage snow thrower, particularly a auger propelled snowblower, you're going to have rubber paddles. These paddles are basically the size of side of a car tire or a conveyor belt type deal. They wear really well. You run them right down on the pavement, and when it's blowing snow, it makes kind of a brrrr as these hit the pavement. That and the scraper bar also runs right down on the pavement. You don't put a gap underneath it like you do with a two-stage snowblower. Oh, this one's dented a little bit. I must have hit something. Take a look at your housing and make sure that the edges are nice and straight. Most of the good brands are this is made out of metal, so just take a pliers or wrench and pull this back straight again. You really didn't do any damage to the machine. When you're looking at your front, on the rubber, on the good machines, like the Toro and the Aaron's and some of the others, there is a hole right here and might be one or two holes. This one's only got one hole on it. That's your wear indicator. If this wears down to the point where that hole is pretty much open, it's time to put new paddles on it. Depending on how you use it, a lot of guys get years and years and years out of the same paddles. Guys who are using them commercially, they usually got to change them every year. The bottom scraper bar, let's go down and look at that, see if we can see the bottom of it. There we go. The bottom scraper bar usually is the sharp edge here, and then something along the bottom to make this nice and solid. If this sharp edge wears down to the point where it's starting to show these other parts of it right here, then it's time to replace that. Or if it's wearing uneven, if one side is wore more than the other. Typically, this is not very expensive to do. Last time I checked, the new scraper bar for these was like $25. Toro makes one for commercial and one for residential. They both fit. So buy the commercial one if you can. The rubber paddles typically are about $45 or so, on maybe $65 depending on the brand. The good machines like the Toros, everything is bolted in. Some of your cheaper machines, they're rivets, so you have to re-rivet or bolt them in. I would recommend that you buy these paddles from the brand that you bought of the machine, like Toro from Toro and so on and so forth, instead of going to Amazon. The Amazon ones typically don't wear as well, and you'll get years out of these Toro paddles and like the Aaron's paddles, some of the other ones. So, all right, that's really about it for the single stage. You might want to take a look at your wheels. All of them use a cheap plastic wheel. Lift it up, wiggle them. You're going to have a little play to them. If you get a lot of play, you may want to put some new ones on. If you get chunks out of them and they don't roll very good anymore, go ahead and put a new set on. They're usually very inexpensive. Yeah, if you got chunks out of them, go ahead and replace them. They're usually really inexpensive to replace. All right, so lastly, let's take a look at the drive system in them. Single stage snow blowers, whether you got an electric one or a gas one, usually have a cover on the side. Just about all of them have a cover on the side, which runs the power from the motor down to the impeller. So let me take that cover off. We'll take a look. Each brand uses a different style belt. So on the Toro, they use a flat belt with grooves on the inside of it. Other brands will use a regular V-belt. Some other brands use a belt that's about as wide as a V-belt, but it'll have teeth in it, cogs. Basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to get as much traction as possible through this. Gas ones will have an idler pulley system in here that when you pull down on the handle, it pulls down and tightens this up. Others will have a clutch inside. This electric one, when you pull on the handle, the electric motor starts up. So it's just a constant tension. If this inside of this belt is starting to fray, you're starting to see threads and stuff like that, go ahead and replace it. If you got a V-belt, take a look at it for cracks on the inside or the outside. And the tooth belts, if your belts, the teeth start looking wore or there's teeth missing, go ahead and replace this belt now. That way you won't have to try and find one in the middle of a snowstorm. Typically these belts will last a long time unless you run a lot of junk through your machine, like newspapers and throw rugs and stuff you forgot to pick up in the snow. But otherwise they last a long time. That's really it. We talked about everything else in the first episode, part 1. This is all you really need to do with the single stage and the 2-stage. Let's take a look at 2 more oddballs, and then we'll be done. The second to last snowblower that we're going to talk about is the Snowmaster, the Toro Snowmaster. It's been widely popular, so we should take a look at it and see what needs to be done. This is a single stage machine. So like a single stage, there's a cover here on the side with a belt in there. Go ahead and take that cover off, inspect your belt just like you would a single stage. On the front, this is not auger powered like the Toro self-propelled one, or the Toro single stage ones, but it does have a piece of rubber paddle right here in the middle. And sometimes it touches the ground. It doesn't need to touch the ground to operate correctly. It also kind of gives you a little better throw coming out. It's one of the key features that makes this work so well. The scraper bar runs right on the ground, and the skid shoes are adjusted so that the scraper bar runs on the ground. You don't put a gap underneath this like you do with the two-stage snowblower. That scraper bar is designed to wear out. It's 24 inches, so it's not the same as their 21-inch models. But again, it's easy to replace if it does wear out. It has the wear marks down here on the bottom, so if it wears uneven or you start seeing those marks showing up, go ahead and replace it. It'll work really well for you. Happens to be the battery operated one. The gas machine is exactly the same except for the power unit. There is a second belt on the Snowmaster. It runs from the engine down to a jack shaft that the belt for the impeller runs off of, and then a belt up here to the transmission. I don't think you'll ever have any problems with that belt. It's pre-tensioned, so you should never have any problems with it. It's a pain in the butt to get to. The top cover or the bottom cover down here are, you got to almost take the engine off to get in there and take a look at it. So I would just ignore that one, and it should last the lifetime of the snowblower. If you notice, there's nothing to lubricate on the bottom of a Snowmaster. The auto turn and the personal pace are all one unit, and the belt drive to run off of the engine is all sealed up nice and tight. So everything is nice and simple as far as repairs and maintenance on this snowblower. Check your cable, make for sure that you have proper tension for the front auger. That's about all you need to worry about. All right, so that's this one. We've got one more to go. The last snowblower that I want to talk about, a few of you may own. It's unique. This is an Aaron's crossover. It's a 20-inch, two-stage, auger-propelled snowblower. It was designed for people with a small, single-car, hard surface drive, few sidewalks, but got more snow than a single stage could handle. So this handles drifts of snow really well. It's unique that it does not have a transmission in it. The auger pulls it through the snow. So the wheels in the back are just caster wheels. Aaron's has made these over the years. The original ones had small wheels on the back, like a single stage. The later ones, like this one, have larger wheels. They're a little bit easier to use. They do have a belt in them, and the belt is under this cover here, and this handle tensions up the belt to drive the front end. You can either take this cover off and take a look at your belts, or the easy way to do it is just tip the machine up on its nose. There's no plate underneath the frame in the back, so you can inspect the belt really easily there. The maintenance that you have to look at on this, the wear and tear, is this auger itself. This auger has rubber strips on it, and these rubber strips are actually what pulls the machine through the snow, just like a good single stage does. The scraper down here doesn't really touch the ground. This touches the ground. So over the years, this will wear off. When it gets down to the point where it's almost right to the metal, it's time to replace this. Again, it's all bolted in, so get the parts from Aaron's and replace it. So that's really the only maintenance that you have to do with this one. Your normal engine maintenance, check the belt, and check for the wear on this strip here. That's it. All right, so we covered two-stage snowblowers, belts, transmissions, friction plates. We covered the single-stage snowblowers, the good ones. The cheap electric ones, pretty much you're not going to be able to get parts for them if you do need parts. Most of those are impossible to get parts for. So if you have any problems with the ones that are not auger propelled, basically you throw them away and you get something different. We also looked at the Snowmaster and the crossover. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments section below. If you got any comments, go ahead, let me know what you think of this video. If you like this video, please like it. If you'd like to see more like this, please subscribe. I'll talk to you later. Bye.